Welcome to Ask the Attorney, brought to you by the Law Office of Chris Doskotch.
Well, hi and good evening, everyone. I'm Renee Charles, thrilled to be your new host of Ask the Attorney. And as usual, we'll be taking your questions tonight. So write the phone number down. It is 698-3742, and you can start calling us right now. We'll be ready to take your questions. And our special guest, it's really nice to meet you. You've been on the show many times. So Chris Doskotch is here, and you've got a location here in town.
Yes.
And you focus on several different things. First, tell us what your focus is.
Workers' compensation, personal injury cases, focusing mainly on automobile, commercial truck, premises liability cases.
And we're talking about automobiles today. We've actually have two different topics we want to look on. Scott's Law and motorcycle safety.
Yes.
So first let's start with Scott's Law. What is this law? It's the move over law, I know.
Right, and I picked it because we've had a number of accidents and fatalities involving first responders, police in the last few months, and it's, you know, they already have a dangerous enough job, and on a traffic stop or being out on an accident scene to have that additional, it's dangerous. And so Scott's Law is named after a fallen firefighter who was, assisting an accident, was killed by a motorist, and in Scott's Law it says, yield the right of way, slow down, keep a lookout. So if the emergency vehicles are on the right-hand side of the road, move over to the left. If you're in the left lane, slow down so somebody can move over. You know, if you can't move over because you're trapped, slow your speed down.
Almost common sense when you think about it.
And it shouldn't matter what, I mean, we always, with police and fire, we have, and they deservedly so, the utmost respect, but anybody who's on the side of the road, and then you look at construction sites, IDOT workers. I was just passing a sign today over in Peoria on 150 about an IDOT worker with his daughter, and he was killed in a construction site accident. So it's just about, and then I think with distracted driving, which we'll talk about later with motorcycles, I think it's even more important because then you're in a single lane, and just 1 or 2 feet could be catastrophic.
Well, and you said something that I think is very, very important that people need to know right now. There's not a lot of leniency in this because we have been hearing so often lately about a worker or an officer or a first responder on the side of the road getting hit. And so there's not a lot of leniency for this law right now if you are involved.
Right, they have to get the public's attention because we can't, this can't keep going on. So the only way you can do that, unfortunately, sometimes is through punishing people with stiff penalties. And it varies. It could be from $100 to $1,000, I believe. I think you can get your license suspended. You can end up going to jail. And if you're DUI and someone's killed, not only are you getting punished under Scott's Law, but you're also going to be under reckless. You could be under reckless homicide, DUI. And I think right now officers are really on the lookout for this, and if they see it going on, they're going to get the word out. And you go to court, the courts, they're going to protect the emergency people.
And what if you can't move over? So if you're driving and there's no way for you to get over, is there something there that you need to think about?
I'm not a criminal lawyer, but probably get a criminal lawyer, number one. Number two, you got to make your case, because it is reasonable. If someone won't let you in, slow down, try to get over. Then you can explain your case to the officer why you couldn't move over if you're boxed in. Then if you slowed down to 20 miles an hour and did other things, then you may be able to escape any type of penalty in that situation, but that's what I would recommend.
Okay. And it's very important to know this because, again, without the leniency there, you're facing fines of hundreds to thousands of dollars. Jail time you mentioned.
Yeah, and multiple offenses. It depends on your speed, the circumstances. Is someone hurt? I mean, there's various factors that could affect the penalties in that situation. But the thing is, keep a proper lookout ahead. If you see lights or people moving around on the side of the road, act accordingly. If you keep a good distance, you keep a good lookout, you should be able to accommodate that.
And this is not a new law.
No, it's just right in the public's attention because of the 2 police officers that have been recently killed in Illinois. I think the last one was in January.
Have you seen many of these cases or heard many people dealing with
You
it?
know, I mean, it's not common, but when it is, it's catastrophic, and they're always reminding people there's families and other people, there's people, not only are they serving the state, they have families or people, and they're risking their lives, and it's dangerous. You stand on the side of a roadway, it's 65 miles an hour.
Yeah. You have a car flying
you have
past
a car
you.
flying past you. It's nighttime, could be raining, so,
Okay. Well, we also want to talk a little bit about motorcycle safety.
okay.
And motorcycle safety, this time of year, we're really starting to see a lot of motorcycles out on the road. Now that the weather's warming
Right.
up a little bit,
Right.
People are starting to get out there and ride again. What are some things we need to think about when it comes to motorcycle safety?
Well, they're a small percentage of the vehicles. They have the same rights as any other motorist on the roadway, exact same, and deservedly so. That's the law. And, I'm a proponent of motorcycles and like motorcycles, and they have the right of way and the same rights as any other driver does, and they have the same obligations as any other driver. But just like if a semi hits a small car hits a bicycle, a car hits a person, a motorcycle waits. I mean, the injuries could be more serious, and unfortunately, a disproportionate amount of the fatalities in Illinois involve motorcycles. And, there's some reasons for that, but the number one thing, and it doesn't get old, is, like you said, Renee, they're new on the road because it's springtime, they're smaller, and people aren't seeing them.
That distracted driving also makes a big difference.
Right. I mean, most accidents, are preventable. I mean, there are single-car motorcycle, just like car accidents, but most of them are preventable. Most of them, are the motorcyclist needs to look out for what's going on, knowing, but the motorists have to look for it. It's smaller. It's not as visible as a car or a box truck.
I want to jump back to Scott's Law really quick before we go to break. One caller wants to know, does Scott's Law pertain to a motorist on the side of the road for a vehicle issue if they're standing out there? How do you differentiate between the authority and just a motorist who may be
Well, we
doing
all
it?
have a duty driving to keep a proper lookout and operate with due care and caution. So you can be held civilly liable to the person on the side of the roadway if
Okay.
you were to strike them or their property. But the Scott's Law pertains to, emergency vehicles.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dive a little deeper into that motorcycle safety. Got a few more questions here that
Right.
we'll get into. So we'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Thanks.
All right, we're back with Chris Dostotch, personal attorney lawyer here in Peoria, and we're taking your questions, by the way. The number is 698-3742. Give us a call if you have a question for Chris. We talked about Scott's Law. That's the
Yes.
move over law. Now we're talking about motorcycle safety. And riders and drivers all have the same responsibilities, and that's
Right.
to watch out for one another.
Correct.
Are there anything different for a motorcycle driver that we need to know about?
I mean, no. I mean, motorcyclists have the same, they need to keep a lookout, obey the same laws that the driver does. I'd say the biggest thing that I see, too, is we were talking earlier, a car goes 1.46 feet per second per mile an hour. So going 30 miles an hour, you're going to go about 43 feet in 1 second. So if you're driving half looking at your phone
Right.
or doing something and a motorcycle's got a smaller profile, I think that leads to an increased amount of accidents. I mean, truly, I don't see motorcyclists like looking at their phone, zipping
Right.
down the roadway. But so when you take your eye, and no one's just staring, but if you're just even half paying attention, just think you're traveling 43 feet at 30 miles an hour, and if you didn't catch and you're half looking at the road, a motorcycle might be a little bit harder to see. That's why I think you add in, you're not used to seeing them, then you add in the higher prevalence of distracted driving, which has higher penalties.
We hear about distracted driving every single day.
It's a problem, and they're trying to come up with a way to address it. Okay.
I like this question here from George. It says, can I be liable for mowing and throwing my grass clippings into the roadway? That could cause an accident.
It can, and it's the third time I've heard that comment
Yep.
in the last week, because I think somebody did a story locally about it, so people have been asking about it. And it's a little bit of a different take, and I never even thought about it, but I think, and don't quote me on it, but I think the Litter Control Act prohibits it's an ordinance violation, putting your grass clippings, because it can be dangerous to bicyclists and motorcyclists.
Yeah, it makes the surface slick.
Right, and so if you got a small road or whatever, and the bike loses its, I believe you could have a case, and if you mow and put grass on the roadway and don't blow it off, I think you could end up having some liability, but it'd be under your homeowner's insurance, not under your car insurance.
That's pretty interesting. I guess, again, never really thought about that before, but it can definitely have an issue with those drivers. What about safety courses for motorcyclists?
There's many safety courses you can take. I'm sure everyone would recommend that because it's different. We all take safety courses for driver's ed, but you got to pass a test and get a classification for a motorcycle. That's what's required.
Okay. Dennis wants to know, his son was rear-ended. How long does he have to go after the other driver?
Okay. Now, his son, that's the first question. You have how old?
Okay.
If the son is over 18 when the accident occurs, it is generally 2 years to pursue a claim. And then you have, if it's not settled within 2 years, because most cases settle with the insurance company, then you have to have filed before 2 years. It'll be barred by what's called the statute of limitations. So it doesn't matter how great your case is, if you don't file it on time, you're done. If his son is less than 18 years old, then the statute of limitations is not going to start running until he turns 18, because a minor has a longer period of time. But then there can be an issue with medical bills because the parents really own it. And the only other thing I want to say on this is, because people need to be aware of it, if it is any type of government vehicle, sometimes there could be a 1-year statute of limitations if it's like a school district or a city vehicle, because the municipalities have a shorter statute of limitations because we don't want our government being sued. So they make it harder. So if you're in an accident, you got a question, it's one of the first things you got to figure out is what's your statute of limitations.
So what's the advice then in a situation like this? Start right away?
Make your claim, make it right away, know what your statute of limitations, call a lawyer. Doesn't cost anything. I don't, myself or other lawyers that do what I do, they'll consult with people over the phone and give you that information. But be aware of the statute of limitations. With Google now,
You can look it
statute
up
of
and
limitations, but be aware that it's out there and it could be an absolute bar. No matter how injured, how liable the other person is, if you don't file on time, that's it.
And is there statute of limitations in this case where someone was rear-ended, whether there's injury or not injury, whether, what kind of an accident
Well,
it is?
If there's no injury, it's not a big deal. If it's property damage, you have longer.
Okay.
You got 5 years. Okay? But if for bodily injury, it's only 2, generally, without those exceptions. If nothing happened, and 2 years goes by, and then something comes up later, it'd be pretty hard to prove it would be related to an accident 2 years earlier.
Okay.
Okay?
Erin has a question about an injury. She injured her back in a car accident and went to the emergency room. Her doctor then did therapy for 6 or 7 weeks. She's better now, not having any problems, but what's the case worth?
Okay. That's a question I won't answer here, and I will not answer in my office without having material.
Okay.
So just in general, and I've talked about it before, you get a recovery based upon your damages, which are generally lost wages, medical bills, pain and suffering, inability to do the things you like to do, or disability, disfigurement. Those are the general areas of damages. It can be past or future, whatever you can prove. But one would have to see the medical, see the nature and extent of the injury. A lot of people used to say it was 3 times the medical bills. Our job is more sophisticated than that, and the insurance companies don't operate on that basis. So, if they don't want to offer it, then you got to sue. So it just doesn't work that way.
There's no formula for it that's just cut and
There's no exact formula
dry.
in personal injury. You can ask 12 jurors what one thinks something's worth, and you can ask another 12, and they may have a completely, $1,000 could be a lot of money or a little money, depending on who you're talking to, for any case, or what something's worth, your life experience. So it's very hard to evaluate. Done like 6,000 cases. I do the best I can.
And they're all different. None of
they're
them
all-
are probably the same with the outcome.
No, and the insurance companies are low-balling most of the cases like that right now. So unless you want to take a very small offer, you're going to have to find a lawyer, and a lawyer willing to pursue those cases, because a lot of them are being fought right now.
Right. Another workers' comp. I was injured at my primary job, but I also have a part-time job.
Okay.
I'm on light duty, and my part-time job will let me work light duty. Should I go back? And if I do, how do I get paid?
All right, before I do the law, I'll give you my commentary. It's
Okay.
unfortunate people have to have, part-time, full-time jobs all the time, and it's fine if you want to do it. Actually, it's fine. But the problem is it's very prevalent, because a lot of people right now, just with school, the cost of medical, to get medical insurance, a lot of people have full and part-time jobs. So I see it way more now than I did 25 years ago when I started. And with the part-time job, if you can go back part-time, go to work. The judges like it when you're working. A paycheck is better than waiting on an insurance company. You usually get less hassle in the case. So if you go back on one, you get your wages. And then if you're off on the other job, then you get workers' compensation for the job you're not able to work at. And also know if you have two jobs, then you're unable to work due to an injury, your base of pay is 2/3 of what you made at both jobs combined. So you do get to include them as long as your employer knew.
So having the part-time job doesn't necessarily penalize you if you have the full-time job and you're able to still do the part-time job.
Yeah, and then the flip side is, and it's true, I mean, you want to work. You have two
Right.
jobs, you're a worker. And so why penalize someone for getting back to work?
Right.
And so that used to not be the law. I was in fact involved in a case where they were penalizing someone for going back to the part-time job. Went to the appellate court, we won, and then eventually they made that a statutory policy to encourage people to work. Because if you didn't pay them, then you would be telling people stay home.
Exactly.
Which-
When did that law change?
Well, that
It's been a
case
while.
was probably 15 years ago, and
Okay.
I think in 2006 is when they do it. It's called temporary partial disability. And
Because like you just said, I do remember hearing that, well, if you're injured and you can go back to one, don't, because you're not going to receive the award that you would from the job if you weren't working. But
Right.
that's not the case
we
now.
want to encourage people to get back to work, not discourage.
Well, we're going to take another quick break, and we've got a couple more questions to get to when we come back. So make sure you give us a call and let us know if you have questions, but we'll be back in just a moment. We're back with Chris Doskotch. Chris is a personal injury lawyer here in Peoria, and he's taking your questions. So if you have a question, feel free to give us a call. The number is 698-3742. And we have another workers' comp question here, and this one comes from Tom. When you have a work comp case and they send you to the doctor, and the doctor says there's no way this happened at your job, how do you fight that, or what do you need to do?
Well, that's not uncommon. Employers have the right to send you to a doctor of their choice under Section 12 Work Comp Act, but that frequently happens, especially if the employer doesn't believe the accident occurred at work, or a person had pre-existing conditions or repetitive trauma. So they'll send someone to a doctor. And some of the doctors people are sent to are more open-minded, and some are more paid, and they're getting what they're asking for. And so if you go to a doctor who says it's not work-related, you're injured, you have the burden of proving your case, so you need to then obtain medical evidence or sufficient factual evidence to overcome their doctor. Generally, judges are going to go with treating doctors because they don't have as much skin in the game. They're not hired by anybody. But you need someone to say, hey, no, this is work-related, and these are the reasons why. Not just it's work-related. You got to have a basis for your opinion. So you can fight it, and there is really no possible way of winning in today's environment unless you have a lawyer. You got to go take a deposition at a doctor. That costs money. We got to get testimony. So there's a lot to be done, but you can fight it. You just don't have to take their doctor's word for it. Let, again, a lawyer look at it. No charge, no recovery.
So those second opinions can be worthwhile when it comes to the doctor, getting another one.
Or we can get it from your own treating doctor. They send you to someone who, and we don't agree with the opinion, your doctor says it's work-related. We'll get the evidence. We can't agree. A judge will decide the case. So it's not over when they send you to a doctor and they say no more treatment, not work-related. But you got to get ready to fight.
Okay. Let's go back to the motorcycles for just a minute here. Bruce wants to know, are motorcycles allowed to lane split in Illinois?
No.
No.
It can
And
be.
lane splitting means,
Well, there's lane splitting and lane sharing. That's when two motorcycles are occupying similar space, staggered generally. Lane splitting is when people are cruising down the interstate, and like I think you can do it in California, not sure about Florida, but that's where you can go right in between the two
Gotcha.
lanes. Now, when traffic stopped and you're, on the 501 or 105 or whatever it is in California, you're going to sit there for 5 hours.
and they just kind of go
They
right through the middle.
That's a little bit different.
Not in
when
Illinois.
You can't do that in Illinois, and it's also a lot more dangerous when people are moving 65 miles an hour and you lane split. So Illinois does not allow lane splitting.
Dave called in last October. He injured his shoulder, had a small tear in it, did not have surgery, but it still hurts. Is he entitled to any type of settlement since he didn't have the surgery and he's still having trouble with it?
Yes. I mean, you have to prove in Illinois, they look at your age, the nature of your work, the nature of the injury. Did you lose any earning ability due to it? So if you didn't have surgery, you got back to your job, it's not going to be the same as a bigger injury where you have permanent restrictions, you had surgery, it impairs your earnings, but you have a permanent injury, you have a tear. So if you have evidence of an injury and you still have residual complaints. Now, if you get in there and say, I had this tear, but I'm perfectly fine and I have no problems, you're not going to get a recovery for that. But if you have residual symptoms, you're more susceptible to injury in the future. So you can go ahead and bring a claim for permanency for that.
Do you need to keep track? You mentioned if you've lost wages or you're out of work even though you didn't have the surgery. Do you need to keep track of all of that? Or what's the best way to do
In
that?
workers' compensation, you get paid if you're off 2/3. If you're in a personal injury case, and that's a great point, and same thing, you're entitled to pain and suffering for your injury and personal injury, which you don't have in work comp. So there's not a prerequisite to have surgery to have a claim. But in a personal injury case for lost wages, you always want to keep track, especially if you're a 1099 business owner, real estate, where you don't have set hours and a pay schedule, because people say, well, I lost 4 jobs. Do you have it documented?
Right.
So you need to keep track of your wages in an injury case.
And what if an employer has let someone go because they couldn't perform their job duties? This person who called in has a permanent medical restriction and can only do the light work, but the employer let them go because they couldn't perform other duties.
Okay, if it's due to a work injury, then you could be entitled to a more significant settlement or award because you lost your occupation due to an injury. And then while you're looking for other work, you can get work comp while you're trying to find alternative employment after your employer doesn't accommodate your restrictions if you're unable to do the essential functions of the job. And this has come up in another case, though, where someone's settled, or if it's non-work related, the other issue you have is once you have permanent restrictions, you are able to collect unemployment also, even though you have a medical restriction, because it's permanent. So you've reached a level of stability. So if you settle your case, you're let go, you're still entitled to those unemployment benefits if it's a work injury, but you might be entitled to more.
Okay. And Michelle called in. We've had quite a few calls today. Michelle wants to know if there's a limit on how much I can get from my personal injury lawsuit. Is there a limit on how much she can get?
No. And like I was saying earlier, unfortunately, there's no limit up or any limit down. Some people only want to talk about we need to limit how much people get, but how about when someone has a back surgery and a case with serious injury and a jury thinks $20,000 is the right amount of money? So there are no limits. Every case, unless it exceeds reason, a jury determines the amount if the two sides can't come together with a settlement, and they get back there with the jury verdict form for pain and suffering, and 12
Get
people
going.
decide what it is.
All right. Well, surprising. We're out of time. This went fast tonight. A lot of great questions. Thanks to everybody for calling in. And if folks want to get in touch with you, I want to remind them that your office is on North Knoxville. They can come by and see you at any time. And I want to thank you for the insight and thank everybody for tuning in. Any last words you want to share?
Just hope everyone has a good summer, enjoys whatever baseball team you cheer for, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Be careful out there. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to Ask the Attorney, brought to you by the Law Office of Chris Dostotch.